DVLA officials lining their pockets at the risk of your death. Money over human lives. The brand new Corruption Watch expose is unveiled right here on The Pulse. Also today, 27 deaths in Galamsey pits this year alone. We hear details from NADMO. That and a special interview with the MD of BOST makes up today's edition of The Pulse, the very final one for the year 2022. I'm so glad you could join us. My name is Kojo Yankson. I'm filling in for Blessed Suga. And that was the Money Over Human Lives Corruption Watch expose. Let's learn a little bit more about this. Jeffrey Okansi is Executive Director for Revenue Mobilization Africa. And we also have on the phone Mr. Samuel Amwa, who is a member of the GPRTU communications team. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
Indeed. I think I'd like to start with Mr. Amwa of the GPRTU. We saw your colleague admit in this documentary that 95% of GPRTU's drivers would be unable to sit, let alone pass, the computerized test. Is this the same as admitting that 95% of GPRTU drivers of commercial vehicles in this country, are most likely unqualified to drive? Right, okay, we'll reconnect with Mr. Samuel Amwa shortly. But I want to take your thoughts, Mr. Okansi, Executive Director of Revenue Mobilization Africa. I mean, talk us through your impressions of this documentary.
Well, it's been a wonderful expose once again. This should tell us what has been the problem with our DVLA licensing system. I think, like you've rightly said, it's one the causes are some of the issues that I've listed here. Complicated application processes, which starts with even the language, understanding what language to use to apply for such a system. In a country where majority of the people do not have access to quality education, and you have difficulty speaking the English language, I think it becomes very complicated when about 80% or more of our Ghanaian drivers in the commercial sector, especially even in the private sector, would not have access to education. So they'll have difficulty applying. That is not an excuse on their part, though, because if you have a difficulty in the language, you could engage somebody to interpret for you, but at a cost anyway. That's also another problem. And then you also look at the issue of weak supervision and poor monitoring, which gave way for people to manipulate the systems and take advantage of the system. The system challenge, the system itself had a challenge for the employee to be able to take advantage of it in just about 2 minutes and do such an evil to the country is also very worrying. And then also an issue of indisciplined personnel. The moral standards, the falling moral standards. Everybody wants to get rich overnight. You know, and then you'll be surprised we still have education, taking care of religious and moral education. Still, we have standards still falling. I think one of the final things to talk about the causes is poor punitive measures. After they have engaged in such, sometimes the offenders are only transferred as a form of punishment, which I think is a motivation for the offender. Instead of recouping the money and sometimes maybe getting to the level of demoting the officer and then going to the next level of maybe ensuring that you interdict such an officer for some months, the officer is only transferred, which I think is just another motivation for the officer.
One of the obvious effects of corruption in public institutions is the leakage and the cost to government. Now here we see officers who are charging the correct legal fees, but also charging something on top of that. Talk to us, why should government be interested in plugging such a leakage? Okay, we'll reconnect with revenue, the organization shortly, Mr. Okansi. But first, Samuel Amwa is a member of GPRTU. Mr. Amwa, thank you for your time with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm very interested in what your colleague said to us in the documentary. I mean, in fact, that was you. Sorry, that was your colleague who explained that 95% of GPRTU drivers are not capable of sitting the computerized test. Since the computerized test is a mandatory requirement for driving in Ghana, is that accurate to say that 95% of commercial drivers in this country are not qualified to drive?
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me say good afternoon to your viewers out there. Yes, if I may hear my colleague very well, I think the question thrown to him was about this computer, testing, or the computer question that you have to undergo before you acquire the driver's license. And then he was also explaining where we also come from. If I say we also come from, most of the drivers, the majority of the drivers, where they are coming from, their educational background. And computer, we understand now almost everything is being computerized. But, it's not every driver that has the computer, that is computer literate or maybe knows something about computers. And that is what he was saying, that about 90 to 95 drivers, or if I may put it this way, GPRTU drivers, have a less idea about this computer system. I think that was what he was referring to.
Well, Mr. Amwa, I think we heard him quite clearly. He said that only 5% of them will even know how to boot a computer, will even know how to switch it on. I think that is definitive. It doesn't require translation. If only 5% of your members can switch on a computer, that means only 5% of your members can sit a computerized exam. And since computerized exam is a requirement to drive in this country legally, does that not mean that 95% of your members cannot be legally qualified to drive?
Yes, you see, let me take you back a little bit. We all acquire licenses. Like myself, I acquired my license way back in 1992, and this computer system wasn't there. And when this computer system was introducing, our leadership, we said something about it. We spoke about it, how it's going to affect, most of our drivers, because, some years back, most of the drivers say will be some people that are not literate, some are dropped out from schools and all that. So this system that they brought, that unless the person undergo a computer training or a computer, pass through a computer test before the person can be, issued a driver's license, became a little challenge. I believe that is the main reason why all these leakages and all this corruption is also going on, because they know very well that this system will create a loophole. And it will also encourage people to be taking money or to be extorting money from other people. Gone are the days the system was clear before one will undergo one will acquire license. The person will be taken to a driving test. He will be taken to what do you call it? A test, another test before without this computer system test. I get it. So this time that all these things has come up now, it's very difficult for somebody who just dropped out from school and want to be a driver. The person will go through the driving test and all that. But the computer thing has been a problem. I think that is what my genius was trying to let them understand, that is the problem we, the drivers, most of us are facing now.
So how do you overcome that problem? How have you been overcoming that problem in the past?
Yes, I believe, me, myself, I believe, if you ask me myself, when these things were introduced, they introduced this things, this computer system thing. We all spoke against it, because yes, it's a way of maybe trying to get a trained drivers or a qualified drivers.
Mr. Amwa, what I'm asking is, today, when a GPRTU driver goes to seek his driver's license, and we know the path through which many people become drivers. So sometimes you start off as a driver's mate, and then you learn how to drive, and then you become a driver. So when your members are going through this process, and it gets to the point where they must go and sit the test for the license, how do they overcome the obstacle of the computerized test? What do they do?
Yes, I believe that is the process they are supposed to go through. That you are to, and I believe myself, I acquired my license way back before this computer system was introduced. So
let's talk about what they do since the system was introduced. What do your members do?
Come again?
Since the system was introduced, what do your members now do?
Yes, most of them go through all this system, but most of them too sometimes, because of this computer thing, sometimes fail. That is why, all these things, they may try to, pay extra money to get this license, just because he knows I'm a qualified. I've gone through, I've undergo training, apprenticeship for about 3 years before, being a driver and all that. But it's only the computer system that maybe is going to disqualify the person or something of that sort. That is why,
so they have been paying.
Those people out there too are finding a way of getting money from them for them to acquire these licenses. And I don't think
so. They have been paying for their licenses.
Come again.
So they have been paying for their licenses.
Hello, come again, please.
So they have been paying for their licenses since the computerized system was introduced?
Yeah, you see, I was saying that some of them can go through it and they pass, and some too cannot go through it. That is why all these things are coming in. You won't get it 100%. I get it. You won't get it 100%, and it's not all the drivers too that have this computer, background, before going through this test. That is why it happens like that.
From you, and also look at the way forward. So if you stay with us, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll continue this conversation. Welcome back. This is The Pulse, and of course, we've just experienced the Corruption Watch documentary, which exposed DVLA officials taking money to allow prospective drivers circumvent the processes, jump all the tests, and receive valid driving licenses. Jeffrey Okansi is the Executive Director of Revenue Mobilization Africa. He's joining us via Zoom. Jeffrey, before the break, I was interested in your take on the fact that these particular officials who are exposed in this documentary are charging, first of all, unauthorized fees and allowing people to circumvent the laid down procedures which would have come with authorized fees. Explain how, in addition to this costing lives, it's also costing government revenue.
Hello.
Yes, Jeffrey, please go ahead.
Yes, majority of these people who are going there also access healthcare, and when they go to the hospitals, these same challenges are available. Some doctors do not speak the languages they speak. It is the work of interpreters who actually help them to address these issues with their doctors. So I think it is a challenge we all accept, but it shouldn't be a justification for people to actually take advantage of a system and pay bribes to officials. Government is losing a lot of revenue through this channel, because you watch the documentary with me. Look at the number of people who are going to an individual who is pocketing all these monies. That should tell you that we have seen X amount of people doing it. What about the number of times people go there and undertake such activities that we don't have account of? Clearly, you can see that we are losing hoops of money. And this was just Tamale and Accra. What about the other regions that maybe we will have such cases on the high? And even in Accra, like I told you, there may be others who would not even actually be caught by this cameras. So it should tell you the whole number of people that are on the streets holding licenses who are not really tested. The implications, the cost implications, not only the revenue that directly goes to, we're expecting to go to government, but also the accidents like you mentioned, you know, the loss of lives and the cost of actually managing these losses that come with accidents. They all relate to this problem. Because if somebody, you're driving your expensive vehicle and a driver who was not well trained runs into you, that cost that comes of that accident is as a result of this unfortunate incident. And all these could be added on, but then you don't have direct information to know whether that driver who caused that accident was one of this group of drivers we are talking about. But if you could just X an amount and add to all these losses, then you can know the total rough amount that we are losing. I think that the way forward for such a practice that to be kept down is to improve our systems, to ensure that some of these unprofessional attitudes of these personnel will be kept down. Also, let's encourage investigators like our lady Francisca and other investigators in the team that undertook this exercise and your outfit for supporting such a wonderful job. Let's encourage their work by providing some materials and ensuring that they also have the encouragement to do more. We should also engage state institutions and investigators like the CID department, the Serious Fraud Office, which is now Yoko, and other officials to come on board to collaborate with these investigators to really nip this practice in the bud. We should also recoup the lost funds. As we've had all this going on, such officials should be picked up. A very good forensic should be done so that we recoup the monies that have been stolen from the state. This is where passionately Revenue Mobilization Africa, we are very passionate about how to recoup the stolen monies and then also to organize periodic checks. This shouldn't be a one-day of activity. We should rather encourage the collaboration and then periodically organize that swoops and clampdowns so that we ensure that we are actually sieving out and sipping out these very, very, very unwanted personnel who are really letting the system down. Now, let's also encourage the localization of the system. As part of redoing the system, we should look forward to localizing the system. But my brother, you would agree with me that we cannot do even all the local languages in Ghana. So we'll be doing maybe the majority flowing ones, like maybe Hausa, Ewe, Ga, Twi, and then the major ones, about 5 of them. Will it also mean that those who do not speak any of these would also have to encourage corruption? The issues about corruption, let's not run and hide. You know, I understand what the GPRTU senior official said. I think rather they should look at how to collaborate with the DVLA and then also some language experts to develop some softwares that can interpret the language, you know, to these other groups. They are not the only ones. I'm sure there are other Ghanaians who are engaged in this practice, you know, and so we should look at it in entirety, but majority of their drivers, like he accepts, you know, it's an education problem. There's a gap in education. That is where the problem is. Let's improve the system and encourage them to also, you know, have interpreters. The GPRT is an association. Once they've identified this problem, they should get interpreters to organize with the DVLA so that they will organize some special sessions for these members of theirs who have that challenge of language. But the problem is corruption, and we need to fight it. My problem is to recoup my money. I mean, those who are actually engaged in this practice, the punitive measures, another very serious area. You don't only just transfer somebody like this who engages in such practice, or you only demote the person. It doesn't solve the problem. Recoup the money. It is about time, Ghana. Let us all, media, all of us citizens, let's call for the recouping of the monies. When
now,
such happens,
Jeffrey,
let's get the people to pay back what they've stolen from the state.
Yeah, Jeffrey, how much of the blame should the institution take? And the reason why I ask this is because this documentary exposes individuals who, in spite of a proper laid down procedure, are doing the wrong thing. But how much blame should we place at the doorstep of the institution that is unable to police its people, and that has overseen the creation of this strange arbitrage where it is now actually inconvenient to do the right thing, and the best way to get your license is by doing the wrong thing. How much of this is on the doorstep of the DVLA as an institution?
I think they should take about 80% of the blame. Talking about the system itself, how on earth did you also bring a system knowing very well? I mean, over the years, we've had people applying for DVLA license, driver's license, and some of these challenges are not new. So when you are trying to bring an improved system, you should have checked the language used in such a system, and so they should take the blame. The majority of the blame should go to them. One technical and very important one is weak supervision. Right at the doorstep in their building, the official was able to actually get into the system with a human interference and get their cameras there. There should have been cameras there to capture this one, because our investigator was able to take the cameras there and capture this one. So how come you can have such an examination? How much will it cost you to have cameras in the exam hall? This was the least they could have done was to provide cameras in such an examination hall. So the biggest blame, I mean, if on the side of policing, that is monitoring and supervision, I'll score them 10 over 100. They did not do, they left their doors ajar. This is the most simplest form of getting to check the system. To have a camera that would monitor who are writing the examination was the least of all they could have gotten for us. And it was a special day. It wasn't as if they'll take the exam for days or weeks. I mean, it was one-off event for about 30 minutes. In an hour, you couldn't have told us anything else, that you couldn't get cameras to monitor that examination hall. I think they should take the blame. And like you rightly asked, what is the next action? The action shouldn't be the offender alone. Who supervised the offender should also be put into this one. Somebody must be interdicted and somebody must be investigated. It cannot be only this gentleman who actually took the monies. Somebody else aided. You saw how it jumped from the junior officer to the superior. It didn't end with this superior officer. I think it goes further. And that's why I'm saying there should be a collaboration between the investigator over here and other state investigative agencies to make sure we nip this practice in the bud. I mean, we need to go further. It doesn't end with this one. And the authorities must take the blame.
Very much, Jeffrey, for the time you've spent with us. Very enlightening. We appreciate you. Jeffrey Okansi is Executive Director of Revenue Mobilization Africa. Now, the Asante region, as at December 22, had recorded 27 tragic cases of residents in mining areas falling and dying in abandoned Galamsey pits. The Regional National Disaster Management Organization says these Galamsey-related deaths involved women and children returning or going to their farms. Regional NADMO Director Frank Kojo Yankson says his outfit is drawing a plan to reclaim parts of the affected areas to be used for farming activities next. He's also calling for legislation to empower NADMO to be able to demolish structures contributing to flooding in the country. He said all of this when he spoke to Love FM's Erastus Asaredonko.
Many parts of the Amansia Central Municipality and communities along the Ofin River have been turned into wastelands and death traps of abandoned pits and gullies. According to the Regional NADMO office, it recorded 27 of illegal mining-related mine cave-ins and drowning in abandoned pits. Cases, it says, involved women and children. Frank Kojo Yankson is NADMO's Chief Disaster Control Officer in the Ashanti region.
We've recorded 27 in the year, and this is as a result that most of these miners finished up. They leave the land bare, they don't look at it, then people going to their farms, then children from schools and all that, they end up in most of these pits. The reports that are coming in, you will see that one going to his farm has fell into a pit, a child that is going to the farm to meet the mother or father. This is the situation. These are the things that we've recorded out. And yes, I will say Galamsey, as we all know, had been a think, a major problem for the country.
The Ashanti region also recorded 38 cases of flooding, 120 fires, 45 cases of windstorms, 12 cases of building collapse, and 4 fuel tanker accidents. Mr. Dudu says some of the flooding situations were preventable. He is calling for a legislation to empower NADMO to take demolition action on structures sited illegally with the potential to cause flooding.
From the local government 936, there is an act which gives power to the city engineers through their special planning unit to take such an exercise. But the game turns out to be in cases where they will tell you NADMO should undertake that. But from where we are, we work, then we get to that point, and it's the city authorities that needs to take that action. If all the actions are given and written to NADMO, we execute it as it is. But I'm talking of a point where there will be a legislative instrument or an act which will empower NADMO directly, that I wouldn't rely on a source or one, but knowing that the person are built in waterway or on a wetland, which will bring issue, NADMO goes in straight based on that act that empowers X to get the building down.
Reporting for Joy News, Erastus Asaridonko, Kumasi.
Now, since July 2022, the hashtag #KenMustGo has been high up in Ghana's Twitter trends. As of 7 December, the hashtag generated 465 million impressions from over 9,600 users. Now, a counter-narrative, hashtag #KenMustStay, hashtag #KenVindicated, emerged in November, also staying high up in the Ghana Twitter trends. An investigation into the two hashtags showed that one of them was a false trend. If you want to know which one was false, which one was organic, then follow Jojo Kobna in this report as he painstakingly queried influencers behind these tweets.
We are not going to the IMF. Whatever we do, we are not. The consequences are there. We are a proud nation. We have the resources. We have the capacity. We are not people of short sight.
We will not go to the IMF today. We will not go to IMF tomorrow. And we are not going as long as the NPP remains in power.
You heard the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, and Deputy Finance Minister, John Kuma. They were cocksure that Ghana would never go to the International Monetary Fund for a bailout. So when President Nana Akufo-Addo announced that Ghana would engage the IMF for a bailout on 1st July 2022, many Ghanaians clamored for the resignation of Ken Ofori-Atta. At 7 a.m. on 2nd July 2022, at Obeng Appa, posted on Twitter,
"It must be tough for Nana Akufo-Addo right now, knowing that you don't have the cujons to sack your finance minister, who is clearly your undoing, simply because he's your relative."
That was when the hashtag #KenMustGo was born. The hashtag trended for days on Twitter. As of 7th December 2022, about 22,739 total tweets were garnered. 4,833 of the tweets were original and 13,967 were retweeted. 2,097 were quoted tweets, while 1,842 were replies. Analysis of the #KenMustGo hashtag revealed that Mr. Ofori-Atta received a lot of Twitter mentions whenever the city underperformed and fuel prices spiked. On 25th October 2022, 85 majority MPs shockingly held a press conference demanding the immediate sacking or resignation of Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta.
In the interest of our side of government to remove our minister. But whatever it takes for the government to put in place the right measures, if it requires removing all the cabinet ministers and setting up a new government, we will support it.
The #KenMustGo hashtag caught fire and trended for days. There seemed to be an organic rise of public opinion on why Ken must go, and it peaked at 7,633 Twitter mentions on 25th October 2022. Anytime the cedi depreciated, many users inundated Twitter with messages calling on the finance minister to be sacked or resign. Over 9,600 users tweeted the hashtag, and this generated about 465 million impressions. The most influential user of the Ken Must Go hashtag was MP for Notong Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, tweeting under the username S_Okudzeto Ablak. He used the hashtag 8 times and garnered 1,738 retweets. In the heat of the clamor for the resignation or sacking of the finance minister, musician and social media activist Kwame A. Plus tweeted,
"We must begin a campaign to force the president to sack Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta. Every professional association, civil society organization, workers' union, and influential people in Ghana and abroad must be part of the campaign." Unquote.
An unidentifiable Twitter user, Hitskashine, responded, hashtag Ken Must Stay. This marked the beginning of the counter-narrative Ken Must Stay. Many users pushing the Ken Must Stay narratives were faceless and cannot easily be identified. Some of the accounts were created in October 2022. These accounts only tweeted Ken Must Stay content. The most retweeted Ken Must Stay tweet was sent out by @MessiKingKong on 19th November 2022. The tweet garnered 129 retweets and 151 likes. We identified 61 accounts involved in coordinated sharing of specific messages on Twitter using the hashtag Ken Must Stay. The seemingly scripted tweets shared by these accounts contained content extolling the finance minister's economic management prowess, urging him on to stay in office. Some of the scenarios are:
the message, quote, "Undoubtedly, the Ministry of Finance is committed to working alongside all stakeholders to ensure we can reposition our economy back on a path of growth and prosperity. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, hashtag Ken Vindicated, hashtag Clueless NDC, hashtag Ken Must Stay."
The breakdown. We identified 47 distinct accounts that tweeted the message 75 times. This means that certain accounts tweeted the message more than once.
Quote, "Carefully observing the ad hoc committee's questions, it's obvious, hashtag Ken Must Stay, because the allegations all be useless and empty. Hashtag Trust Ken to deliver," unquote.
The breakdown. 34 distinct accounts tweeted the message 40 times. Again, certain accounts tweeted the message more than once.
Quote, "Interestingly, the censure hearing has inured positively to the image of the finance minister. Hashtag Ken Must Stay, hashtag Ken Vindicated, hashtag Clueless NDC," unquote.
The breakdown. 25 distinct accounts tweeted the message 27 times. This means that certain accounts tweeted the message more than once.
Quote, "Even if you hate him, you can learn from his eloquence, coherence, and calm demeanor. Hashtag Ken Must Stay, hashtag Ken Vindicated, hashtag Clueless NDC," unquote.
The breakdown. 15 distinct accounts tweeted the message 16 times. This means that certain accounts tweeted the message more than once. Who are the key drivers of Ken Must Stay? Number 1, @MessiKingKong. This account is a faceless, unidentifiable user who has 1,123 followers and follows 1,579 Twitter accounts. The account sent out 99 tweets with Ken Must Stay. The second one is @Kojo. This account sent out 49 tweets with the Ken Must Stay hashtag. It retweeted several tweets by @MessiKingKong, @Fabulous Ike, @Bengelo17, @Kweku Brownies, and @Ahika Doreen, all of whom were previously identified as major drivers of the Ken Must Stay narrative. Now the verdict. The Ken Must Go conversation on Twitter appeared to be relatively organic. The hashtag was tweeted by over 9,600 Twitter users. The political characters that drove this narrative on Twitter are well known, and as members of the opposition, their stance on the matter is understandable. This narrative on Twitter mirrored what appears to be the general sentiment of most Ghanaians at that time. Even MPP MPs called for Ken Ofori-Atta to be sacked. The Ken must stay narrative was largely inorganic. The coordinated sharing of scripted messages exposed in this work is evidence of this assertion. The hashtag was tweeted by 292 Twitter users. Most of the accounts that were involved in the sharing of Ken must stay narrative are closely linked. They follow each other, mention each other, and retweet each other's tweets. This is just one example of how social media is used to amplify certain narratives to make them appear more widespread than they actually are. Jojo Kobna, Joy News.
Now, Managing Director of the Bulk Oil Storage and Transportation, BOST, Edwin Provençal, was adjudged the petroleum sector's CEO of the Year at the 6th Ghana Energy Awards. It comes on the back of his impressive turnaround of the company, which until this year had posted consistent losses for years. The company recorded a 160 million cedi profit in 2021 against a loss of 291.07 million in 2020. So how did he turn this company around? We bring you our special interview with the MD, Edwin Provençal.
Hi, Provençal. Thank you for talking to JoyNews. The last 2 years of your tenure appears to be going well for you in recent times. You've received some commendations from the sector minister, Dr. Matthew Pugu-Prempeh, who appears to be elated by some marginal gains you're doing here at BOST. We're learning that, of course, in the last 10 years, you've turned the tide and you're beginning to make profits. Ordinarily, if you set up an organization, you would expect that some profits will come through, but this has not been the trajectory for BOST over the years.
Yeah.
How did you make this work in the first place?
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to your listeners. This journey hasn't been smooth. It's been very rough. I mean, I got in here in 2019, but then I had some predecessors who had started some work from 2017. The picture in 2017 wasn't good at all. I mean, the company was on the verge of comatose, collapse. But yes, thanks to the various stakeholders, especially my board of directors, the staff, the various ministers who have come, and the President of the Republic of Ghana, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, who reposed a lot of confidence in me. Yes, we have turned the tide around, and with reference to your question, how did we do it? I mean, it can take about a 2-3 days conversation. But yes, we came in, analyzed the situation, assessed the situation, realized where the challenges were, and together with the staff and other stakeholders, we did a lot of stakeholder engagements, and then decided a direction for the company. The direction we chose was twofold. The first one was operational excellence, because we had lots of issues with regards to our operations. For example, if you looked at our revenue earning assets, it was hovering around 18%. All our barges were out of service. All our pipelines were out of service, 364 kilometers length of pipeline out of service. All our 4 barges, 1 tugboat, 1 floating dock was out of service. We had 3 out of 6 depots unfunctional, out of service. And then we have 15 out of 51 tanks also out of service. I mean, these are assets that earn us revenue, and all of these were out of service. So virtually we had 18% of our revenue assets in operation. That meant that 82% was out of service. If you also looked at the financial side, the liabilities on our heads was humongous. $624 million trade debt, $415 million legacy loans, cedis, legacy loans.
Right.
We had BDC claims on BOST 37 million, and then $109 million capital capex liability on our heads. We also hadn't audited our accounts from 2015 to 2016. However, during that period, bonuses were paid, which that gets deeper more, because on what basis do you pay bonuses when you hadn't audited your accounts? Not only that, we had tax liability, a tax overhang on our heads, 47 million Ghana cedis. And then boss margin, which was, everybody, I'm sure you'll talk about the boss margin.
Yeah, we'll get there.
The boss margin was voted in, as of 2011 was 3%. That was when the last increment happened. And fast forward to 2019, it was still 3%. The boss margin had lost almost 80% of its value. And the boss margin is earmarked to help operate and maintain the boss infrastructure, as well as expand if there's excess. So that is, in a nutshell, that is the company that came to meet. We had a capex liability, contingent liability in terms of cases, because we didn't have money. A lot of people had taken us to court. And if you quantify the worst case scenario in terms of the judgment debt, it was hovering around 161 million Ghana cedis.
In fact, the Auditor General is beginning to raise some concerns about some of these issues. We'll get into them shortly. But as of now, you're running at a profit of about, in absolute terms, over 160 million cedis.
Yes, as of 2021.
That's laudable, but for some experts as well, it's just a drop in the ocean. I mean,
based on our capacity.
Based on your capacity and what's happened, I mean, over the past few years. The State Interest and Governance Authority, SIGA, reported that you were making a combined loss of over 400 million cedis, and all of this is happening under your tenure, the first 2 years, I believe. So if you juxtapose that to the gains you're making now, we shouldn't be praising you for that. What's your take on it?
It depends on how you look at it. I mean, I came in 2019. 2019, we were coming from a huge loss from the previous year to 2019. 2020 is debatable. Now, I'll explain why it's debatable.
You're not accepting that it's partly your fault?
No, I'm taking full responsibility. I'm just saying that the financials are debatable. How you interpret the financials are debatable. Right. Because in 2020, if you go and look at the SIGA report, they reported that my profit after income tax was 1.9 million cedis. They reported that. However, there was a revaluation of our assets. There was a revaluation of our assets in 2020. And the accounting standards, IFRS, says that when you revaluate your assets and there is an appreciation, the difference between the book value and the appreciation has to be hit directly to your P&L as a cost. Is that monies that were paid out? Is that a real expenditure? It's not a real expenditure. It has nothing to do with the underlying business. What it does is goes to increase my balance sheet. You know, the value, extra value goes to increase my balance sheet. But in terms of the underlying business, the business of BOST, a provision for deferred tax liabilities on the revalued assets cannot be used to gauge my performance. So I disagree completely. Yes, that 290 something million revaluation provision took BOST to a loss of 291 million Ghana cedis. But the people who understand financial statements know that that is a technicality.
And in fact, some experts go ahead to then downgrade your performance to minus 40+%. I'm sure that you've read all of these figures. What are you doing to correct that notion that, well, it's just a continuous case of inefficiency here at BOST?
I mean, rating me 40% based on what? If you pick a company that made losses of 456 million cedis in 2016, fast forward to 2021, that company is making 160 million Ghana cedis. You say 40%. That is ridiculous. If you pick a company that had operational expenditure of 538 million Ghana cedis in 2016. By 2021, where do you estimate that operational administrative expense should be? Where do you think, should it go up or down with inflation and everything?
Well, it depends on what you do. It depends on a number of factors anyway.
So I'm asking, normally, all things being equal, if your administrative expenses in 2016 was 536 million Ghana cedis, fast forward to 2021, normally, should it go up or down?
It depends once more on the factors. So you would have to break down the factors.
It's okay. You don't want to answer that, but it's okay because I guess you are the one asking the questions. Now, in 2016, the administrative expenses was 538 million cedis. In 2021, it was 228. That is efficiency. Less than half of the administrative expenses in 2021. Would you rate that a 40% performance? No. In 2016, the badges were non-operational. My badge revenue was 0. In 2021, my badge revenue is almost 15 million cedis. Is that poor performance? It's not. In 2020 to 2021, I've almost doubled my trade revenue. You can't say that's poor performance. In 2011, in 2012, the boss margin contribution to revenue was 50%. In 2021, my boss margin contribution to my total revenue is 34%.
But I guess if that's your interpretation of the figures.
No,
but in terms of the increment, we've had a jump from 6 to 9% in terms of the absolute. So so it's based on interpretation, isn't it? What
in 2011-2012, the dollar equivalent of the boss margin was 2 cents. 2 cents. In 2021, the dollar equivalent was less than 1 cent.
But if you, I'm not able to quote your sector minister on this at your annual meeting. He was then referring to the boss margin, and that's why we need to zoom into it at once. As part of the reasons why you are having the 80% of your assets which you claim were redundant having been revived. So if indeed you're saying the margins and the values of it were depreciating, Ghanaians would say, well, that's not true. We've had an increment from 6 to 9%, and part of the reasons why you're beginning to see results is because of these margins.
I don't dispute that fact at all. Without the boss margin, there was no way we could have fixed our assets. So I went to ask for 12 pesos, which was going to be an equivalent of the 2011 dollar amount, which was 2 cents. So when I went, I said, okay, Mr. Minister, kindly increase my margins to the dollar CD equivalent of 2 cents, which was going to be 12 pesos. He said, no, I'm going to give you 6 pesos. I said, okay, So I got the 2 pesos, I got the increase, the 100% increase, and then I used it judiciously. Now, don't forget that boss margins have been in place for a long time. I mean, subsequent administrations have had boss margins. So it didn't come only during my time. And that is why, if you want to compare, if you levelize the boss margin in dollar terms, you will see that in 2011-2012, it was hovering around 2 cents. As we speak today, the boss margin is not up to 2 cents. It's not up to 2 cents. So yes, it went up. Yes, it helped us fix all our badges. Yes, it helped us reduce our turnaround time from 4 hours to 1 hour 30 minutes. Yes, it helped us reduce our badge loading days from 7 days to 1 day. That's operational efficiency.
But there's a lot of kickback at that boss margin. The minister then announced that you are not going to revise the whole decision on the boss margin. But given the fact that we're moving into an era where, of course, Ghanaians are beginning to complain about the increment in fuel prices, some experts, including some of the stakeholders as well, the transport unions, have been calling for a reduction in the components in terms of the tax measures for petroleum pricing. COPEC, for instance, which is the consumer, the Chamber for Petroleum Consumers, COPEC Duncan Amwa, has expressed some sentiments about that consistent rise in the figures and a decision by the minister to keep the BOST margin. And I just want to bring you excerpts of what he says. So he says that I totally disagree with the minister when he says that the margin will not be taking off, bearing in mind the very fact that the private BDCs also have depots where products are stored and they do not get any margin but operate leanly.
Excellent.
You're not being fair on the market.
Okay. That is what happens when you compare apples to oranges. I'll explain why. That will be your conclusion if you compare.
No, but these are his words, right?
I say if you compare, he's comparing apples to oranges. That's what I'm saying. So let's look at why the BOST margin was in place. So in 1993, when the company was set up, it came to light that, Accra Tema is where the business is. I mean, 75% of the business is in Accra Tema. But BOST has a social mandate to store, distribute, and transport petroleum products across the length and breadth of this country. So we are mandated to go and build tank farms, to go and put infrastructure for a social purpose, not for profit. Are you with me? And in the wisdom of the founders, thanks to Dr. Kobna Donko, and whose shoulders and other shoulders on which I stand, they envisaged the need for the BOST margin so that we can use it to operate, maintain, and expand infrastructure. That is a social mandate. Does any of my BDC friends have any social mandate? They don't have any social mandate.
Yeah, but you share the same space with them, right?
Yes, I do, but they don't have a social mandate. So if you talk about taking away the BOST margin, because the BOST margin comes at a cost, that cost is a social cost. Are you with me?
Right.
So take away the BOST. Don't just take away the BOST margin. When you are preaching, take away BOST margin. Also take away that social cost. Then you are being fair and comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. But you don't say take away the BOST margin, but BOST will continue to manage the depots in Borga, in Savelugu, in Buipe, in Akosombo, in Mamiwata. It's not fair.
Yeah, but the point is, these are strategic assets, you believe, which some of your competitors, I'm using that word for them, do not even have in the first place.
But all my competitors are putting their resources in the most profitable areas in the country, which is Accra Tema. Go to Accra Tema. You have a plethora of tank farms. Why are they not moving in? Nobody has stopped them from moving into the hinterlands because it's not going to be profitable. Private money does not do social projects, but BOST is mandated to do these things, and it should come at a social cost, and that cost is the BOST margin. You get what I mean? So if you leave it to me, a private sector person, I'm going to shut down all these other depots, and also I would have shut them down and also operate solely in Accra Tema to sweat my assets and milk the best out of the best I can out of those assets. But because the shareholder has given us a social mandate, we are mandated to operate in those areas. Are you with me? So it's not apples and oranges. Number two, BOST is a critical infrastructure entity. It's not just a profit-making entity. Profit is not our sole motive. We are a critical infrastructure entity. Go do your research and tell me which country has outsourced its petroleum security. None. Because it is so important. It can be used. You remember 1973, what happened in the US when OPEC decided that they were not going to sell to the US. So what happened in the US? So it will be very foolhardy to think that as a leader, you will pick your national assets and hand it over to the private sector, or your petroleum security and hand it over to the private sector. You know what that means? If you do that, that means that the day the private people are not happy with you, you know what they're going to do? They're going to shut down.
But if indeed BOST was that strategic and critical infrastructure as you're describing it, this is the time to bring that leadership to bear, as some experts would say. The fact that ultimately we're in a time where, of course, we need you the most. Ghanaians are complaining about... yeah, so you do agree that indeed when Ghanaians say, let's take out the BOST margin, I guess it's because of that feeling that you're not living up to expectation.
Acknowledged. For 10 years, we've been making losses. It's a journey. I came in 2019. I still insist that 2020 on the underlying business, I made profit of 2 million.
But that's your personal opinion.
That's my, no, it's in the numbers. You can see.
But that's your opinion.
It's in the numbers. So you can decide not to see the profit after income tax and just go to the overall profit, which is a $291 million loss. But there has been progress. That's the point I'm making. There's been serious progress. And it's a journey. Now that we've started making profit, we're going to use some of these profits to fix some of the assets. We still need a BOST margin to maintain the assets. As we start making more profits, then instead of paying dividend to the shareholder can tell us that, you know what? Instead of expanding your infrastructure to the areas where you do not have infrastructure, please use some of these monies to bring in extra cushion.
How about managing effectively?
Do you know that?
How about managing effectively?
Do you know that we used to have a strategic reserve levy? We used to have a strategic reserve levy purposely for what you were talking about, to make sure we buy and store.
Right.
Since 2006, that levy has been zeroed out. So today, you and I, that levy is like the premium we pay to enjoy that insurance and that cover.
Yeah.
If you don't pay your premium, will you get insurance? No, you won't.
So that's where I'm coming from. The fact that now you're making profit, let's revise the BOST margin, and then you make judicious use of the profits you're making.
Let's not confuse the two.
Right.
When you talk about providing the public with the comfort we need, that is the strategic reserve levy.
Right.
That has been zeroed out. You get what I mean? There were two levies. The BOST margin, if you take it out, it will be almost impossible to manage the infrastructure, the whole of the infrastructure, and they may end up deteriorating again. So the BOST margin, once BOST gets to its peak, I can tell you that whatever gains we get will be used to expand our petroleum infrastructure.
Not the proceeds you're making now. Is that your argument?
No, it's virtually nothing. 160 million cities can't do anything. It can't do anything, I'm telling you, for BOST. Yeah, in terms of the infrastructure we are managing, it can't do anything. 160 million, just $16 million.
Right.
One cargo is about $50-something million. $16 million is a drop in the ocean when you talk about bringing in petroleum products. It can't really do anything. But we have a job to do. We have to keep this infrastructure running, and it comes at a cost. When we do it very efficiently, there will be some surplus. That surplus, we can now decide to use it to expand the infrastructure, which is the minister's dream. His dream is that those extras that come, we should put it together and use it to expand the petroleum distribution infrastructure. But if he changes his mind and says that out of this margin, the dividend you're going to pay, use it to bring in extra products. We would use it to bring in extra products.
Are you not making Ghanaians pay for the sins of the past?
Not at all. I mean, I'm a Ghanaian. I feel the pinch. I buy fuel. My mother buys fuel. My late father is dead. But there are other people in my family who buy fuel. We feel the pinch. But this is the first time in 10 years that we have made profit. We can't solve...
Which you are describing as a drop in...
It's a drop in the ocean, but we can't solve all the problems overnight. It's a journey. And I agree with you when you say, yes, maybe we need to have a second national conversation Boss is not a policy person. You get what I mean?
Right.
So we need to have a second national policy debate on how to fund the strategic reserves. Hopefully we'll bring back the strategic reserve levy. Hopefully.
And that would obviously meet the displeasure
not necessarily
of stakeholders, because you've heard from the transport operators.
Not necessarily.
They're having too much. Transport fares, for instance.
Not necessarily.
Transport fares, for instance, are about to go up.
Not necessarily. Let me tell you what's going on.
So you agree they are simply not happy about what's happening, just piling the debt more and more on them?
Let me tell you what's going to happen when BOT gets efficient. When BOT gets efficient, it means that the transportation of fuel products is going to be done with the most efficient and cheapest mode of transportation. Are you with me? So yes, the transportation cost on the price build-up, that is the UPPF and the PDM, it is possible for that to go down. Are you with me? But if a huge chunk of our transportation is being done using trucks, the cost will keep going up. So there is a wisdom in ensuring that BOT gets efficient. When BOT starts expanding its pipeline infrastructure, it means that over time, the cost of transportation using pipeline is like 60% that of on the road. It means that over time, the price at the pump can go down. Not only that, don't look at the price build-up and tell me which is the highest driver of petroleum prices. It is not a BOT margin.
It doesn't matter. At least we need
BOT
to start
margin was reduced from 9 pesos to 7 pesos. What did it do? It was reduced from 9 pesos to 7 pesos. What did it do? Go and check the forex. Go and check the forex portion on the BOT margin. That is what is. Even though prices in the global market are going down, today as we speak, in Ghana they are going up. And so, you need to do proper analysis on the key drivers of petroleum pricing in Ghana.
But you do agree that looking at the time in which we find ourselves,
yes,
any possible revision in the price build-up will be highly appreciated by stakeholders.
I'm telling you, they took 2 pesos.
It's because the margin is feeding you significantly as an agency, and that's why you seem to be positive about it.
We budgeted to do certain activities with 9 pesos. Overnight, to help cushion the taxpayers, 2 pesos was taken out. Go and check the other margin price contributors and find out how many were taken from all of them. So if you want to attack the BOT margin, it will not be fair. What you want to do is to kill BOT.
Where do you situate your social contract in all of this with the Ghanaian public?
Be specific.
Because you're saying that, well, this is the social cost to it. Have the margins pay, and then we get BOT retrofitted. However, Ghanaians are saying we can't share that cost with you now. Try and also bear with us. Allow that margin to go. Let the transport operators see a certain, ripple effect in the system, and then prices will eventually come down. You're not willing to share that cost with the Ghanaians. So where do you situate your social contract?
You will be killing your nose to spite your face. Seriously.
Really?
Yes, because in order for the petroleum distribution to happen efficiently and effectively, in order for the government's policy on price parity across the length and breadth of the country to be successful, you need BOT infrastructure in various parts of the country.
You're talking about expansion.
But not expansion. You need the existing infrastructure to work. And I'm telling you that as at 2019, the existing infrastructure was almost comatose.
The minister says you have 15 running now, I guess? 15 out of...
we have 15 out of 51 faulty. Now we have 12 running.
So
we
that's
need to repair 3. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. That it is the BOT margin that has enabled us to get to where we are. We are not at peak. This 160 million cedis you're talking about is profit. It's not cash flow.
Right.
Let me explain to you.
Okay.
When you issue an invoice, it is a sale. But until you collect the money, it is not cash flow.
Yeah, that's how it all unfolded when we sat down with the new Bost MD who is turning that company around. Well, let's hope that next year turns our lives around. This is the very last episode of The Pulse for 2022. The next time we're together will be in a brand new year. I wish you the very best of this season. Thank you so much for staying with us throughout the year. And on behalf of Blessed Soga and the team, I wish you a happy new year. My name is Kojo Yankson.